Hi guys, John Meadows here, and if you are wondering if you should incorporate refeeds into your meal plan, you've come to the right place. So stay tuned and I'll give you my thoughts. All right, hi everybody, John Meadows here, and today's topic is refeed meals. Very, very popular. And just to give you a little bit of history, when I started competing in the 80s and 90s, we didn't really do refeeds. There was really no such thing. It was you ate your tuna and your brown rice, maybe a little bit of oats, some egg whites, but you just kind of roughed it all the way to the show. So there wasn't really any such thing. And I don't really think they became popular until, I want to say maybe 10 to 12 years ago was when I first started hearing about refeeds. And you know, coming from that background in the 80s and 90s, I was pretty anti-refeed. I thought it was just an excuse to cheat on your diet. I didn't really understand all the benefits. And luckily since then, I've worked with a lot more people and I've done a little bit more research and I understand the benefits of it now. So that's what I'm here to do, is to share my thoughts with you. So the first question is, you know, what really is a refeed? A refeed, in my opinion, is basically an increase in carbohydrates from your normal diet. Now, when you're dieting, you're going to be in a caloric deficit, okay? So let's say that means you're consuming 150 grams of carbohydrates a day. That is part of your plan. I'm just focusing on the carbohydrate part. So if you're going to do a refeed, I might bump you up to 300 or 350 or 400 or even 500. There's various circumstances that are going to dictate that. But a refeed is basically an increase in carbohydrates, in my opinion. Now, if you're wondering to yourself, what about fats and proteins and all that? Protein, I typically keep it pretty much the same. Fats, if I increase that, then I tend to just give people a cheat meal. But for the purposes of a refeed meal, think of it just as an increase in carbohydrates. It could be for one meal or two meals, maybe half a day. Generally what I do is it's one meal, or it's over the course of a half a day, or it's over the course of a full day. And depending on how bad you need it and how big it needs to be as well will dictate that. So who's it for? Well, it's not just for bodybuilders. Anybody who's trying to lose body fat and really preserve their muscle mass and preserve their metabolism can benefit from this. So just because you may not compete doesn't mean this concept isn't valuable for you. If you properly incorporate refeeds, you'll find that you can hold on to your muscle better. And this is one of the biggest things. Like when I competed, we got in the 80s and 90s, we got really lean. Just as lean as we got in these days. But the difference was, a lot of times back then we actually lost muscle. We lost a little bit more muscle than we lose now. And we just kind of considered that acceptable, and that was part of the game. But, you know, we've gotten a little bit more knowledgeable now, and I really like to fight as hard as I can to preserve muscle mass. It could be for you, even if you don't compete. So why would you even do a refeed? Well, there's a multitude of reasons. Some of them are as simple as psychological. You know, I have some people that I work with that they'll make it to the second week in a diet, the third week or the fourth week or the fifth week, and they mentally really have a hard time sticking with the diet, and you can just see them struggling. I'll get email messages sometimes where they say, can I please have a refeed meal this weekend? You can just tell they're on the verge of snapping and going overboard, and you don't want them to do that. You don't want them to go crazy, eat a bunch, then get depressed and eat a bunch more, and then tell you they didn't cheat, but they did, and then you get confused as a coach, and you're like, how did you gain 7 pounds yesterday? But so sometimes it's psychological, and it's just to help people. And I have people that I use this for strictly for psychological reasons, and it's very good. And then, you know, the other part is physiological. You know, sometimes when you're in a caloric deficit for a long time, you have some hormonal things happening. You have your fat cells produce this hormone called leptin, and think of it basically as a hormone that tells your brain, hey, I'm cool, I'm full, I don't need to eat a bunch of food. And when those circulating levels of leptin start to drop, your body starts to go, man, I'm hungry. I'm getting more and more hungry. So then you're fighting physiological, like your hormones. And so it's very difficult. And what we've seen from various research is that refeed meals that are rich in carbohydrates tend to, I don't want to say restore leptin levels, but they have a positive increase on it. So they can help from that perspective. And then physiologically, some other things. Well, when you diet and you're in a caloric deficit, your metabolism slows down. If you eat less, it slows down. That's just how it works. There's no way around it. And as you're dieting week after week after week after week, and you see your metabolism continuing to slow down, then sometimes adding a little extra food in there is not a bad thing. It may tell your body, hey, he's not in starvation. It's okay. You don't need to slow down quite so much. Now, this is very debatable on how much this actually happens, but I do think it's a good thing. It's a good concept that when you're starving, that you pull yourself out of that kind of starvation, that deficit. I do think, and I've seen this with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clients over the years, sometimes you can really help their metabolism just by giving them these refeed meals. And then sometimes, and I don't say this lightly at all, I say this with sincerity, sometimes there's social reasons. I tell people that they can't just diet their life away and not engage in life, in having meals with your spouse or with your kids, with your family. Maybe your family has a special event. So I do like to help people understand that you don't have to isolate yourself from the world. So if you want to have a meal every week, or we have some refeed meals, or you can have some extra carbs, the carbs don't have to be brown rice, then sometimes it gives you the opportunity to have some meals with your family. And in some of those cases, I'll tell them just eat a cheat meal. But so there's psychological reasons, there's physiological reasons, and there's social reasons. So hopefully you can see from that there actually is a legitimate purpose to these refeed meals. So how do you incorporate these refeed meals? Again, it's just lifting carbohydrates. But here's the thing that is going to vary. You may decide that you just need one meal, and maybe it's an extra 100 grams of carbs, or you may decide you need a half a day, 3 meals or 2 meals where you add 100, or it may be a whole day where you add 500, something like that. And the way I look at it is there's no right or wrong answer for this. It depends, as with anything in our sport, it depends on the context of the situation. If I have somebody that has been dieting really, really hard on really low calories, then those people will probably get a more aggressive refeed schedule. So in other words, what I write into my plans is I call it a plus X for the day. I may say a plus 300. I may say a plus 200. And what I mean by that is a plus 300 would be take your regular diet you're on and add 300 calories or 300 carbohydrates for the day. So let's say I had somebody all the way down to 100 grams of carbs. If I give them a plus 300, that means they're going to have 400 grams of carbs for that day. Now you have the other side of that. Maybe somebody hasn't been dieting really, really hard. They're just feeling like they need a lift. Their metabolism is slowing down. Their pumps aren't quite as good. Maybe you give that person a plus 50 and you put it just in one meal. Okay, in your post-workout meal today, I want you to add another 50 grams of carbohydrates on top of the 40 that you normally have. So there's variations here. You could do, like I said, plus 50, plus 100, plus 200, plus 300, and it's going to be dictated by the situation. But what I want you to think about is the harder and the longer you've been dieting, the harder it is, the more liberal you should be with your additional carbohydrates. Okay? Now, the last thing is when. So how often do you do this? Do you do it once a week, once every 3 days, once a month? Again, just like in the how, that is going to be dictated by the context of the situation. I have people that I have to do this with every 4 days. I have people that I do this with every 2 weeks. So again, there's no real magical right or wrong answer. Although I will say in general, I tend to do refeeds one time every 7 days. Now, let me add to that. I don't really start the refeeds until most people have been in a deficit anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So the first half of their diets, again, whether somebody's competing or not, it's just getting them into a deficit and establishing that. And then once they're in it for 4, 6, 8 weeks, and then you can really see the need for this refeed. If you get somebody who's, say, very, very overweight, and then they want to refeed after 3 days of dieting, that's probably not the right time for it. But if you get that same person and it's 8 weeks later and they've done an awesome job, they've already lost a lot, and they're really wanting to get, some bread for the weekend before they go to bed on Saturday or whatever, then that's probably a better time. So there's no real hard and fast rules. I like to look at it like once a week, and then I determine, okay, does this person need a meal or a whole day? And that's going to determine that plus number, plus 100, plus 200, plus 300. All right, so those are kind of my guidelines. I hope all that makes sense. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks a bunch, and we'll see you next time.